So keeping on my recent theme of US politics, I want to talk a bit about the Democratic National Convention in Chicago and Kamala Harris. And I'm going to talk about various angles of this, where I think that Democrats need to be careful, what I observed from the convention, what I think is going to happen. Those are broadly the themes. Um, I'm not going to be speaking so much about Biden's legacy in these videos, or this video. I don't know if I'll go into part two or not, because that'll be for another video. There will, of course, be overlap, and it's not totally insignificant because he has been the president for the past almost 4 years, but it's not for this video. Um, so, first of all, it's worth looking a little bit at history. I came across a channel by a guy called Mr. Beats, that's his channel name, and he, or rather his username, and he lays out some of this stuff in a fun and informative way. I like the way he approaches it. For example, president favorite foods, that sort of thing. But he done one on the closest American elections, the closest run American elections. One example, I think he put this one at the top, the 1876 election between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden. And it was so close, it came down to one electoral college vote. Of course, it was different then, smaller population, fewer states, but one electoral college vote. And the tensions were so high that there was fears of a second civil war. Remember, at this point, it was only a decade after the first. Um, and there was pamphlets going around saying Tilden or blood. Well, obviously that never transpired. Um, the subsequent two elections, 1880 and 1884, were very close. One of the beneficiaries was Grover Cleveland, who was the only Democratic president in that era. You know, in the Gilded Age, he was the only one basically up until Woodrow Wilson. Um, so then in the 20th century, there was the 1960 election between Kennedy and Johnson. In the state of Hawaii, it came down to 115 votes for Kennedy, but very, very close election. An interesting thing is studies have found actually that it's long been believed that Lyndon Johnson helped Kennedy win the South, and Kennedy himself cited that. But academics apparently have said actually it wasn't the Johnson push that helped Kennedy win Texas, which indicates something. It indicates that people tend to look at the nominee and they tend to look in the presidency as well at the president, i.e., the role of vice president is to the American voter largely um, insignificant or at least less important, which in a way, I don't know why that is because they're one heartbeat away from the presidency. Um, Lyndon Johnson described it as a bucket of shit, apparently. Um, I suppose it's sort of like seen as a non-portfolio role. I mean, actually, the vice president does have a number of responsibilities, and it's worth bearing in mind that Harris and Dick Cheney have something in common. They were temporarily acting presidents whilst their bosses were incapacitated with, I think it was colonoscopies. In the end of the 1910s, Edith Wilson effectively took over the power of the presidency. She handled her husband's presidential administrative roles, i.e., seeing what sort of paperwork should go to him and not after he suffered a serious stroke. There's still historic controversy over that, over how much influence she actually had. Some even say she was effectively the first woman president. Um, but leaving aside that, if the Democrats win this year, Kamala Harris will make history. Um, So what I want to focus on here is, and like I say, I may go into a second part, is the convention, what I think the Democrats need to do, my thoughts on it. Because actually, if I was an American, I do feel I'd be a lot more at home with the Democrats. One issue more than any others would do it for me, which is the gun violence thing. I just think that looking at both parties, the Democrats are far, far better. They've tried to do something about the problem. Um, they've tried. You know, the Clinton administration brought in a assault weapons ban, which did actually, if you look at the statistics, reduce the number of mass shootings Columbine happened on his watch, but it's notorious, I think, for being an outlier, actually. If you look at what's happened subsequently, look at the Las Vegas massacre, the worst in recent decades. Trump's response to that was pathetic. Very watered down legislation proposals. The Republicans have shown, even if there was a more moderate Republican candidate than Trump, they have shown they're utterly weak on this issue. The Democrats at least have tried, and Obama and Biden had to go up against Republican controlled Congress. So they've tried. That is one thing I think is just would definitely align me more to the Democrats. Their attitude to healthcare, the Democrats see it as a human right. Obamacare is far from perfect, but it was, I think, a move in the right direction towards universal healthcare. And the scaremongering over this, the Republicans say it's socialist, it's socialist. It cannot be right in the world's biggest not biggest, the world's most powerful country, there are millions of people who don't have access to healthcare because they can't afford it. I mean, that's appalling. Again, at least the Democrats have tried to do something about this on the abortion issue. Now, that's one of those things I actually don't have strong views on, and I understand both sides. I mean, I don't have strong views on in the sense that I'm not partisan about it. Um, this is something I thought a bit about. I think the Democrats are sensible to remind people that it was the Trump administration empowered judges to overturn Roe v. Wade. And I think that it would be sensible to remind young women that there's going to be extreme red states that will bring in extreme laws about that. I saw one Democratic ad that showed a father and his daughter crossing state lines and being pulled over, and it was kind of ominous music playing, and the state trooper said, "I'm arresting you on suspicion of seeking an abortion." And it just, I understand the strength of feelings on this issue, but I think threatening basically to impose the death penalty, as some Republicans have, on women who have an abortion, I think that is fanatical. Um, I mean, you have a situation, and this was quoted in the convention, of women going into labour in parking lots, of having unsafe abortions. And this isn't because they want to do it, it's because they have to, for the sake of their health. Um, I think that there has to be an understanding that there are situations such as rape, incest, where that is really an option that they need to take. Um, but I do think the Democrats also need to be careful here, because it's one thing saying they're pro-choice, but they need to be careful that they're not portrayed as the pro-abortion party. Many Americans are religious, and whatever people think of that, that's just a fact. Many Americans, that would sit uncomfortably with them. I saw a black woman interviewed in Illinois, the same segment that I mentioned that MAGA extremist in, but she said she wasn't going to vote for Harris just because she was a woman. She didn't say she was voting for Trump either, but she said, "I go by the Bible." Now, there's a lot of Americans will think like that, including a lot of women. So the Democrats need to be careful. Yes, expose the extremism of some of these anti-abortion laws, but don't make it look like they're necessarily pro-abortion. Rather, just they're pro-women's health. So I just think they need to be careful there. But I think it's valid to remind, because a lot of young women will be concerned about this issue. Um, so yeah, I mean, personally, I would naturally be a lot more aligned to the Democrats. But I do not like the trajectory they've went down in recent years of. I mean, it's always been there to some extent, but I do think the hard left has had a bigger voice in recent years. I do think woke intolerance has shown its head. Now, I don't think it's incompatible to be staunchly anti Trump, as I am, whilst also having a big problem with zealous wokeism that could be found in the Democratic Party. I mean, talking to people about white privilege, that is not going to win over poor white voters in West Virginia or Arkansas. And in this election, particularly, the Democrats absolutely have to win every vote in swing states. I'm not saying that those are swing states, but it will be the same issues in the swing states. So identity politics, critical race theory, all that thing, frankly, I think is toxic to a lot of voters. and the Democrats are associated with it on crime. No doubt the Trump campaign is going to attack Harris on that. I think that would be a mistake, actually, because she was a prosecutor. She went after serious sexual predators. Nevertheless, the party that she represents cannot shout on this. I've attacked the Republicans on the gun violence thing, but there's no escaping the fact that Democrat-run cities have a serious crime problem, and some of them are sanctuary cities. So the Republicans, with some justification, will point that out. Harris and her campaign need to be ready for that. Border security. I think one of Harris's faults as vice president, she was too, you know, slow to visit the southern border. That is something people care deeply about in Texas, Arizona. The battlefields of Ukraine are a long, long way from people who are concerned about that. So Harris needs to take that seriously. But she can point out that the Democrats did try to get a bipartisan bill on that issue. Um, the next video, I'm going to maybe talk more about the convention itself. I'm just trying to cover some of the background things here. I do think in those swing states, every single vote is going to count, and I think it's going to be very close. So the Democrats need to be very careful that they don't polarize voters in any way. I think the convention was successful, but they can't be complacent, um, and they cannot look like they're living in a bubble. I also think in the debate, Harris would make a mistake if she makes it battle of the sexes. No doubt Trump will say things, which is the whole microphone controversy, but she needs to frankly rise above it. If she sort of acts like if she takes the line, oh, don't say it's because I'm a woman sort of thing. I think that will go down well with women, but others might look at that and think, no, don't play the woman card. I think one reason Obama's campaign was successful is because he did not pitch himself as the black candidate. If Harris wins, she will absolutely make history, but she needs to show that she is a president for millions of men as well. And I think she will. I think she can do that. But she just needs to be careful not to allow Trump and his mouth to kind of goad her into that. So what I'm saying is hardline feminism will be polarizing. She'll make history, and it is breaking the glass ceiling. It's historic. I don't dispute any of that. I just think she needs to be careful not to make it look like a battle of the sexes. That will just polarize male voters. I'm going to go into a second part with this because I'm just aware of the space issue.